Fine. So I have started talking about class and object in the last session that we had yesterday, right? And I hope you have at least some brief idea about what a class is and what an object is. So class, you can think of it as a very similar entity as we have seen structure. Okay, so structure is a derived data uh, type that we as a user have derived it. We have defined that data type and we can create many variables of that particular data type. In a similar fashion, class is also a kind of a data type, but it is much more than that. Okay, and we can create similar variables as we have done it for structure. So we can create variables of that data type, which we call as objects. So those are instances of that class, and we create those instances which are called as objects. And in this particular class, that is today's class, so I am going to show you that how that class can be defined and how objects are used by a programmer. So we are going to study the same problem that we have studied some time ago, in which we have taken input of force, its magnitude, its angle, and then we used that magnitude and angle of various forces that user has inputted to find out what is the resultant force in X and what is the resultant force in Y. Okay, that is the problem that we are going to do now using classes and objects, and the programming style that we will be using is called as object oriented programming. Okay, so the same problem we already have done that using computer programming. We used C++ for that, but the way we tackle that problem, that way is called as a procedural programming. Okay, it's basically the way we do it manually. Okay, in the same fashion we have done it. So we'll be asking ourselves, hey, what is the magnitude of first force? Okay, we have taken that magnitude, then multiplied by cosine of the angle of that particular force. Similarly, we did it for second one, third one, and so on, and then we added up everything. Okay, that way of doing that activity is called as a procedural programming. And now we are going to study object oriented programming. So what we'll be doing is we'll be giving more stress on creating classes, and then objects is something that the user will be using. And it's like imagine that there are 2 or 3 students who are working on a project. You already have done that, right? So there are 2 students who are working on a project, and at times it is really difficult to manage how you both will be working, what part you will be doing, what part your partner is supposed to do. So how you are going to kind of inherit whatever is the logic which is developed by your partner. So it becomes at times difficult. Then it can also happen that somebody can be a very fabulous programmer, whereas the other cannot be that good programmer. So can we use the fabulousness of one programmer, and can that kind of enhance the ability of programming of the second person who will be using it? So all these aspects, they are kind of taken care of when you go for object oriented programming, and how they are taken care of is what we are going to see in the today's class. Okay, so let's directly start working on the program, the same program in which we have taken input of force details from the user, and we have found out what is the x component of the force and y component of the force. So the same program, but by object oriented programming approach, we are going to do that. Okay, that object oriented programming is popularly called in the lingo of programmers as OOPS. Okay, so that is the jargon that programmers use. So OOP, so that's OOPS, so what they call us. Okay, so let's try to go for that OOPS, and let's try to see whether we can write down our own program. So let me share the content first. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see the Dev C++ that right now I'm sharing? I have multiple screens over here.
Yes,
May I
ma'am.
know? Okay, fine. Good. Okay. So let me start writing down that program. Okay. So we'll do it in the typical fashion. So beginning is the same one. So that won't change. Then let me not keep space because otherwise I can just reduce the font a bit. Are you able to see it properly? Or should I increase the font?
It is visible.
Okay. Okay. So before I go ahead and directly start writing the main function, what I'll do is I'll define the class. Okay. And in this case, the class will be named as a force. Okay. As of now, think of class exactly similar to what structure is. You already know how we have defined structure and we have access structure members inside the main function that you already are aware of. Okay, in the same lines. Okay, so let's try to think of that. We are writing down that class. Okay, and now we are giving a name to the class, which is force. Okay, so force is a class now. Okay, and now I have to define what are going to be the members in that particular class. Okay, so the first member that I'll say is a float member. Okay, which is a force magnitude. Okay, and then I'll say is another float member, okay, which is a force angle. Okay, so these are two members. Okay, in the beginning I'm defining which are parts of this particular class force. Okay, so as of now we are using only these two members. Okay, let's try to go into main, and we are going to obviously increase our class further. Okay, so this is a very beginning primitive class that we have defined. Okay, and now in this, how we have been doing for the structure in the similar fashion, let me say that I'm defining a class object. Now I'm not going to call it as a variable, but it is called as an object. So it's not class, it's actually name of the class that we have to use, which is force, right? So the way we have been doing it in the earlier case, we have seen that for structure also we have done that. Okay, so force is now, you can think of it as a data type that we have defined just now. Okay, and we are creating an instance of that force, and you can give it any name, let's say f1. Okay, f1 is the first instance of that force. Okay, so just now as I was telling you yesterday, so employee, you can think of employee of IITR is a class, and the Nashri Zogolkar who joins IITR as an assistant professor is an object of that class. Okay, that is the instance which is created of that class employee. In the similar fashion, a student of MIED is a class, and let's say Paras Kumar. Okay, so he is instance of that particular class which is created in 2020. Okay, and so he'll be called as object of that particular class type. In the same fashion, force is a class, and f1 that I'm right now defining over here is an object of that particular class. Okay, now you know that we can set certain things in the structure. Okay, so structure members we can access in main, and we can pass certain values to them. Okay, so however, let me tell you that it's not possible in class that way. Okay, let me show you that. Okay, so let us write down that, hey, enter the magnitude of the force. Okay, enter the force magnitude. Okay, so this is the message that we are giving to the user, and let user input something, and let's say that I am putting it inside that magnitude. And the way we have been doing it, in the same fashion I have to do, then I'll do it this way. but this is going to show some error, and we'll try to see to it. Okay, had it been a structure, then this program would have run nicely, but this won't run. It's going to give me a problem, at least I suppose so. Okay, so it's called as class basic.
Return 0 is also not there.
Yes, oh, just you keep correcting me for that return 0. Thank you so much. And I invariably forget it. Okay. So there is one error. Float force, then there are these double colon, and then force underscore mag is private, which is written over here. Okay. And hence it is not able to kind of put that value in that. I mean, it won't be able to access it. So it's not compiling it at all. Okay. So what is the meaning of it? So object which is f1 that is right now created, it has got certain members inside, which are force underscore mag, force magnitude, and force underscore angle. Okay. So these two object members, or these members of this class, okay, they are private. Only functions which are inside class can access them, but functions which are outside class cannot access them by default. You can change the default, and you can make it accessible outside. Okay, but this is the default setting of class, whereas default setting of a structure is other way around. Okay, in the structure, default setting is public. Okay, so all members of the structure can be accessed outside the structure. Any function which is outside the structure is able to access all members of the structure. Okay. However, that is not the case with the class, and it's intentionally not done that way. Okay, there is certain reason behind that. Okay, I won't reveal that reason for as of now. But if you decide to work onto it, then you will get to know that why it is so. So you are not supposed to know every details which are going inside the class. Okay, so as a user, okay, so imagine that there are creating this particular program. Okay, one friend will specifically work on creating this class. Okay, whereas other friend, what he or she will do is he will use this class and write down this. Okay, so the one who is writing down this logic need not know everything which is going inside this class force. Okay, that person is supposed to have access to only few variables and few functions, okay, which are part of this class force. Okay, it's not required that everything which goes inside should be read by this main function. Okay, the way I have given you one assignment, which is that programming assignment that I have given you as a classwork evaluation. Okay. So what you have given as output of that activity is the last code. But obviously you might have taken n number of efforts, you might have generated n number of other codes. Okay. And I am not supposed to know all those codes, all those activities that you have carried out to generate that final code. But what you are giving access to is the final code, right? So only that part is public. So you have made only that part public. Everything else which goes behind in generating that code is private, and it's there only with the programmer who has done that. Okay, so others are not supposed to know that. Okay? So it's not required. Unnecessary information you don't have to pass on. Okay? So that's why class has got certain variables which are public. Otherwise, almost all variables are private, and they are private by default. Okay. But if, let's say, if you want to change that default, and how you can do it? Okay, you can do it by changing the access specifier. You can say that, hey, hereafter whatever comes is going to be public. Okay, so let me write down that. And then also there is one problem that if you don't allow me to access this, then how am I going to store that, right? So if you don't let me access this force underscore mag, then how am I going to store that force magnitude for F1? Okay, so you have created F1 object, that's great, good, but you are not letting me use that object's variable. Then how am I supposed to give magnitude details to F1? How am I supposed to give angle details to F1? Okay. So that is the problem. So for that, what we do is we specify one access variable firstly over here, and we write down functions, okay, which are used to store this data that you give from outside, okay, and we won't be doing it in this way. I'll be showing you how to do that. Okay, so before I write down a function for setting the data, I will have to specify the access. Okay, hereafter there is going to be a function which is going to be written in this class, and that function should be accessible outside this class, and hence I'm going to make it public. Okay, so this word which I've written over here, which is public, and then I've given the colon mark over here, so that indicates access which is allowed for all those functions and variables, which will be written after this. Okay, so this is called as access specifier. Frankly speaking, there is one access specifier over here which is not required to be written. Okay, so this is private. Private is one access specifier, public is one access specifier. Then there is another access specifier which we are not supposed to know right now, which is called as, if I'm not wrong, protected. So there are certain members which are protected, which are having partial access. So only few other outsiders are given access, and few outsiders are not given access to those variables. So those are called as protected. You are not supposed to know that. Okay, and as I've told you, that private access specifier is by default. You don't have to write down this. Okay, so even if you don't write down, it is considered as private to that force. Okay, in the same fashion, you can have your access specifier in structure as well, but structure has got a default access specifier which is public. Okay, whereas class has got its default access specifier which is called as private. So class is kind of updated version of structure. So let's try to see that how we can set the data. Okay, so what we'll be doing is I'll be writing down my own code over here, which is a function, and that function is going to help me set the data. Okay, so I don't want that function to return anything, but that function should only take the data from main, and it has to store that data in these two variables, which are force.mag and force.angle. Okay, and how would I write down? Let's give it some name. Okay, set force. You can give it any name that you want. Okay, now, or set details, set force details, set data. Set data is a very popular name which is used for all these setting functions. Okay. So you can also use set data. That sounds more professional. Okay. So set data is a very popularly used name for all these classes. Okay. But you can write down any function of your choice. Okay. So what are the inputs that it is supposed to take? It has to take one float input, and it will be, I'll be calling it as a magnitude, which is different than this one. Made a mistake. Magnitude. Okay. And then there is one float, which is angle. Okay, so these are two variables which this set data function is taking. And what is the job of this set data function? What it has to do is it has to pass these variables to force underscore mag. This, so what is going to be passed to this? Whatever magnitude is, that needs to be passed to force underscore mag, and force underscore angle should be equal to angle. Is it clear what I have done? Are there any queries?
Is this different from constructing?
It's different. I may not talk about constructor. Okay. Constructor is actually default specifier. It's not a default specifier. You are spacing, you are kind of giving values to it. So constructor, I may not choose to talk about. Let's try to see. So ideally speaking, I'm trying to wind up this class today because I'm starting with another course from tomorrow, and hence I have a plan of not having a class on Friday if at all I am done with what I'm supposed to talk. Okay, that's going pretty fast. And can anybody let me know if constructor is required in your tutorial number 12?
Yes, ma'am. In 11 also.
In 11 also. Okay, it's not actually a big deal. We can write down a constructor. Okay, fine. So let's try to see. So this is only setting data. It's not a constructor yet. Okay. So constructor is something different. Otherwise, is there any problem in whatever that I have been discussing?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay, fine. What we can do is, whatever I left discussing today, okay, I will make a video recording, okay, a lecture of around 1 hour or so, okay, which will be a video recording of how to write down a constructor. So for this class itself, we'll write down a constructor, okay, and I will upload that recording. That way it will be easier, so that I will also not have to be physically present on Friday, because we are starting with another course, and this time again I am fully loaded, and we are going to meet once again in the next semester of yours as well. So I have semesters running one after the other, so it's generally not the case, because first years they generally go along with all other students, but yours is kind of not in unison with all your seniors. So your first semester has got ended. I mean, it's going to be it's going to end very soon. Whereas your seniors, they are starting with the even semester of this year. So it's like it's pretty trickier this year. But anyways, we have to manage with it. Okay, so what I was telling you is this. Yeah. So what we are doing over here is we are setting the data. So which essentially means that from outside this class, we are taking some input and we are assigning that input to those members. Is this part clear with everyone? Okay, I'll show you how it is done. Okay, so but before that, I'll write down another function, because we need to ensure that what we have done is already there. So I need to write down one more function which will help me printing all the data which is there in that object. Okay, so that is called as show data, display data, is display data, data display, that kind of display. Okay, so I'm writing down a display function over here, okay, which will display what is there. And now this display don't have to take anything. Okay, so it's already there, so it has got access to everything, which is magnitude and angle. And now I'll only write down cout statements inside this. Okay, and cout statement will only read like this, that the magnitude of force is, and this is equal to magnitude. Then another line is for angle.
And spelling is wrong.
Yes. Actually, your right hand and left hand, they move with different speeds, and that causes the problem I have been experiencing in last so many years. The angle made by the force with x-axis is now here you can assume that the one who is writing this main, or let's say the user is anyway dumb. You assume that user is anyway dumb, but the one who is writing this main, you can assume that that person is also dumb. Okay, so you can think of that person may not even be knowing that it is required to have angles in radian in order to process it in CPP. Okay, so you imagine that person is entering all values in radians itself. So you can assume that level of dumbness so while writing the class. Okay, so, so from that perspective, what okay, so anyways, so I have forgot, it's only C out that we have done. Okay, so in the C in, I will have to ensure that this needs to be converted to radians. Okay, so it will be converted to radians in this way. It's like M5 divided by 180. Right, and however here we will be showing, by the way, this magnitude won't be accessible over here. Magnitude is a variable local to that function. So what will be accessible over here is force mag. Okay. And angle will also not be accessible, but force angle will be accessible over here. So force angle is in radians, and that needs to be converted to degrees. And that's what I'm doing over here. Is this point clear? What I've done? Is it clear with everyone? Any queries?
If we call set data before display, then it will automatically be converted to radians, and then again we are.
So its force angle is anyway in radians, but I don't want this to be shown in radians to the user. Okay, I am using force angle in radians. I will be writing few other functions over here as well now, so which will give me components of that. But for that, I'm going to need a force angle in radians. But user need not know that it's in radians. So you will pretend a user as if it is in degrees. So this is the
Include
pretension
CMath.
that. So yeah, we need to just see the CMath. So hash include CMath. Okay, so is this set data and display data also? Right now, display data. Underscore in between, that looks nice. Is it clear whatever that I have done so far? Now I can access individual members of this object F1. Okay, so what I'll do is I will say F1, so it has to enter magnitude. Okay, and then that needs to go like this. Or before we ask the user to enter the magnitude, let's do it this way and show you this way, and then we'll do it that way. Okay, so we can set it directly in main. Okay, so let's not ask the user temporarily. I'll show you how it works here, and then I will show you how you can get the input from user. So let's say that F1 set data, and in that you will be giving input to it. Okay, in which first input, which is highlighted over here in red color, okay, is the input of magnitude, and it has to be a float type of a variable. Okay, so you can give any, let's say 100, then comma, and then you have to give the second input, which is for angle. Okay, and that angle should be in degrees by default. Okay, so this is the default angle. Okay, So I am giving 0. Okay, so this line which I have written over here, what it has done is it has passed these variables, two variables, rather these are two constants, 100 and 0. So these values, they have been passed and stored inside members of object F1. Okay, now you can ask that F1 dot display to show the data which is there with it. Okay, so display data, and it doesn't need any input and it doesn't give any output as well. I mean, there is no any output which is provided by this, but it will show you that display. It will display the data. Is this clear what I have done over here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now you are able to see that how small is this code which is written in main when you have clubbed everything together in this class. Okay, so if you have many such objects, you will have to write down only 2 lines per object, setting and displaying the data. Okay, so what you have done by this style of programming is that the one who is working in main, okay, you have reduced efforts of that person. You have given that person a kind of handles that he or she can use. Okay, and these handles are these handles. You have given these handles, and everything else has been taken care by this class which you have written for facilitating someone's writing of this function name. Is it clear? So let me run this. Okay, let's hope that there are no errors in it. See, it has shown the magnitude of force is 100, the angle made by the force with x-axis is 0. So it is able to access everything. Okay, is this point clear?
Ma'am.
Somebody was saying something. Is there any doubt?
No, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Okay, now what we'll do is there are 2 things that we can do now. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll add one more entity over here. Okay. And this time I'm saying that it is a name and I'm saying that it's string. Okay, it is a string type of a data. We haven't used string type of a data yet. Okay, so call it as force name or force type. You can say it's like gravitational force or frictional force or reaction force. Give it a name. Okay. So I'm saying that this force type, okay, is what is the data type of that? It is string. Actually, string is not more than data type. The string is a class. Okay, similar to force, string is also a class which is written by somebody to make our lives easy. Okay, so we can read strings, we can store those string values somewhere, then we can access it, we can carry out many operations onto it, and all that is stored in a class, and this compiler is already having information of that class. We will have to just include the name of that class, and if you include the name of that class, then all those functionalities which are there with that class string, those are available to you for using it over here. Okay, so the way somebody has written this class string, in the same fashion we are writing our class force over here to make somebody else's life easier. Okay, now whatever goes inside string, I am not knowing it. Okay, I will be using only few functions which are made public which are publicly available, which are part of that string, which are members of that class string, but which are public, I'll be using only those functions to carry out operations, and everything else is done behind the screens. I need not know that everything about whatever is going inside. Okay, so how that thing is being stored, how that big thing is being sorted out, and all other stuff, so which I am not supposed to know, that is completely blind to me. Okay, so now you will be able to appreciate that why certain things are not made public, and why it is there behind the screens. Okay, fine. So this is a string type of a data, and here in that set data, I need to write down that name, string name. Okay, and then I would like to write down one more line over here, and force type is equal to name. Or other way round. Okay, the better way to do this is do it that way. Can do it that. So this is fine. So I'm writing out over here that this is a force this is force of type then I'll be saying name. It's force type. And enter, obviously. Here I can put gravitational force. Okay, so now it is taking 3 inputs from me. First one is the name, second one is the magnitude, and the third one is the angle. And it will show me that as well. Okay. So let me run this. This is a force of type gravitational force. The magnitude of the force is 100. The angle made by the force with x-axis is 0. Okay. Now let's ask user to enter these values. Okay. So how would I do that? So what I'll do is I'll define a variable of string type, which I'll be calling it as a name over here. Then I'll be defining a variable of float type, which is magnitude and angle. Okay. And now I'll ask user to enter new type of force. Now user is going to enter something, and that is going to be a string, and I should be able to store the string. And we have seen that there were certain problems when we were reading the string, the way we were doing it initially. Okay, the way that I had shown you in the earlier lessons, in that if there is any space between two, let's say if you say gravitational space force, then it will read only gravitational, and space will be considered as a null character, because we were reading everything as if it is array of character type data. Okay, so when you read it as array of character type data, then that space is considered equivalent to null, and hence it is considered as if the string is ending over here. So I am not going to read what user is inputting in that fashion, but I'll be reading it in a different fashion. And this is the handle which is provided by the class string. Since I'm including the class string, it has got an additional handle. Okay, there is one function. Somebody has written that function. I don't know what is the code of that function as of now, but somebody has written that function which can take care of spaces in between, and still it can read the next word which comes after the space. Okay, and there is one typical method of doing it. If I'm not wrong, it's get line. So get line, and then you have to say cin, and you have to say name. Okay, so if you do this get line cin.name, then what happens is that whatever that is being inputted, okay, that is taken in and stored in variable called as a name. Is this point clear what I have done over here? And this functionality is available because somebody has worked on to this string type of this thing class. Okay, so this is it. Now I also need magnitude of the force. Enter the force magnitude. Then angle. It's pretty simple over here. You simply write down this operator. You can use operator the way we have been using it, and you will be putting it in math. And then you will say enter the angle made by the force with the x axis, and whatever that is being inputted, that will be stored in a variable called as angle. Okay, and now I will be saying that I am passing these three variables over here which user has inputted. Okay, one is name, other one is man, and the third one is angle. And this line, which is line number 39, will display the data which is right now stored in this object F1. Okay, so shall I run the program? Is it clear what I have done?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine, good. Now, this particular person is asking me what is the type of force. Okay, I'm saying that it is gravitational force. Now it is asking me what is the magnitude. It's 100 units. What is the angle made by the force with x-axis? It's 0. This is a force of type gravitational force. Now you are able to see that it has taken care of the space which comes between these two words, gravitational and force. In the earlier sense, when we were doing it in earlier fashion, that time we were not able to take care of the space, right? It would have ended at after this gravitational, after that L, it would have stopped. It would have read that space as a null character which is being inputted, and therefore a full stop. Okay. Is everything clear what I have discussed over here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine, good. So now, let's say if you have many such forces, so you can keep doing this in a loop. Okay, so before we go for putting everything in loop, I need to add a couple of more functions to it. okay, which are essential. So these are only what we have done right now. Only we have inputted certain data, we have placed it at appropriate locations, and we have displayed it just to ensure that it's there. Yeah, but we also need to operate onto it, right? Unless you operate onto it, then there is no any use of this data. It's just lying there, idle, not doing anything. But we don't want it. What we are actually working for is we are interested in finding out what is the x component of that force and y component of that force. Okay, so now I am writing down another function over here, okay, which is going to give me x component of that force. And obviously, since it is giving me x component of that force, so that function has to return something, and something that is being returned is a float type of data, and you can call it as fx, whatever is I mean you feel like. Okay, so fx is name of the force, which will convert that force into its x component. Okay, and it doesn't have to take inside anything, because it has got access to this magnitude. So what this force magnitude and this force angle, it has got access to both these things. So you don't need to pass anything to it now. Once you set the data, so once you are done with setting force angle, then you don't have to pass anything over here. Once it has got that magnitude and angle, then everything is done. Okay, so you don't need any additional input. It's already there with it. So what it is going to do is that it is going to access those variables, and it's going to operate onto it and find out what is the x component, and that x component it is going to give out as output of that that particular function. So I'll simply write it down in this way. So directly write down the return statement over here, and what it has to return is force magnitude is spelling right? Yes. Multiplied by cosine of force angle. Now this function is a member function of this class, and it is public. Yeah. Now I'll write down another function which is y, okay, which will give me y component. Okay. It's the only thing I need to change.
Wasn't it force mag?
Yeah. Sorry. So inside this, yes, inside this class, sports math. So is it right? It seems so. Is there any other error inside this one? No. So we can write down another statement over here. And now how I'm going to access is this f1 dot fx. So if I simply say f1 dot fx, it's going to find out x component of that force, and it's going to give me. So are you able to see how easy it is for somebody who is writing main function? Okay, that person has to kind of keep his or her brain aside and just simply work on it. It's pretty easier. The way we have done it in case of, we don't know what this particular line has done. I am not at all worried about it. Something has been done. So somebody else has taken care of this. So it has made my life much more easier. And actually this is the very game changer when you are working in object-oriented programming style, and it comes into picture especially when you have a big group. So if you decide to work into a big group, so in a program and a group of programmers, then obviously you need to work in this object-oriented programming style only. That time you generally don't go for such procedural programming ways, because it becomes really difficult to inherit somebody else's codes and then process that further. But it's much more easier if you have such kind of codes with. I hope you are able to appreciate what I'm saying. Are you not? Okay, so let me say that this is, or x component of force, only that much is sufficient. X component is this one. Similarly, I can write down for y component as well. Only this change would do my job, right? So when I am in main, this is the only thing that I have changed to kind of fetch the y component of that force.
Ma'am,
Okay?
you have written C.
Sorry. So after every C out, I'm used to write down C. Yeah. So this is the y component. Okay. So let's run this program. Let's try to see. Now let's give it some other values. Okay, so let's say that this time it's a frictional force, and that frictional force is acting along x direction. So this was the gravitational force. We said that gravitational force acting along x direction in the earlier case, right? Because we said that x-axis is angle with x-axis is 0. That's absolutely wrong. Okay, so we'll this time go ahead with gravitational force, but we'll assume that it's acting in the downward direction, so which essentially means that it's making angle equal to 270 degrees with the x-axis, assuming x-axis to be positive along horizontal direction. Okay, so and we are measuring the angle in the counterclockwise sense. Okay, so let's say that's gravitational force. This time we are correcting it. Okay, magnitude is still 100, but the angle is 270. And now you will be able to see that x component is 0, so which is almost 0, and y component is minus 100. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so how easy this thing has become for somebody who is working in main. Okay, so this is something that you need to appreciate, that why you are learning this object-oriented programming. So finally, if you decide to land up into this programming platform, then you have to work into object-oriented platforms only. But nevertheless, okay, if you are using computer programming for carrying out any activities, so such as what we have been talking about, okay, so those mechanical engineers, they do use computers for. Okay, so for that, it's not at all necessary that you should write down in object-oriented style. Okay, so you can write down in the procedural style the way we have been doing. That you can do. I have written my entire code which is taking care of wave propagation through complex structures. It has got all sorts of non-linearities. There is material non-linearity, there is contact type non-linearity. Still that wave propagation problem is being taken care of. So that all that code, entire code has been written in procedural programming way. So it is possible, but it is indeed difficult if when you pass that program to your students, then you realize that how difficult it is. Okay, then you feel that, oh, I should have written it in object oriented style, then that would have been much better. Okay, so from that perspective, yes, you need to use object oriented programming style, but it's not at all necessary. Okay, so those who don't find this style comfortable enough to work with, it's not necessary at all that you should work in this style only. Okay, so is this point clear with everyone? Whatever that I have discussed in the today's class, all those discussions. I suppose it's clear with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, if there are multiple forces, then we need to write the statements of F1x many times. F2x will write. F2x, F3x.
You will be so you will be writing down this one only. So it okay fine.
22 to 35.
I'll create one. So let's try to do it this way. Okay. So let's create F1, F2, F3, or maybe you can write down this way as well. I suppose we'll be able to do it this way. Okay, for I equal to 0 and I smaller than 3 and I plus. Okay, and now this one I'm declaring before this. I also say that it's integer I, and then inside this I'm writing down these things. And here what I do is I say it's fi dot set data this, and I'm not displaying everything, but what I do is I display only these x and y components. Okay. So now I have kept everything inside the loop. Okay, that loop is going to run 3 times, and each time it is taking some input from me. Okay, and that input is of type of the force, magnitude of the force, and angle of the force, and it is setting that data. Okay, at appropriate location it is being stored, and we are asking x and y component of it. Okay. Or you can carry out this activity outside as well. So let's be only setting loop, and then you can write down another loop over here, which will again run from I equal to 0 and I plus plus, and then inside this writing down this x component of force I is just only like this. And
Ma'am, can we do this without using arrays? In line 44, can we write fi dot set data?
fi dot, so how so Shrey, what are you saying?
Ma'am, like in line 33, we write force F1, F2, F3, and
F1 dot set data, F2 dot set data, F3 dot set data. You can do that.
Ma'am, like in loop, we write in line 44 fi dot set data, then will it run for I is equal to 0, 1, and 2?
I suppose. Let's try to check it out. Okay.
It shows error.
Okay, fine. So I need to check it out. Okay, in that case, we'll have to do it in this way. Okay, so I'll see to it, okay, how that can be done. Or we will create 3 separate instances. How to create array of that, we'll see to it. Okay, I'll do it and I'll post that in that video as well. Okay. So this one I won't set it in this way now. Now I'll set it in this way. F1 dot set data. And I'll call it as gravity first one. I'll give it 100. I'll say it's minus 270. Then I will say F2 is a frictional force. Frictional force which is say 50 and it's acting along 0. Then I will say reaction which is again 100 but it is acting along positive y direction. So this has to be F3. And then I can simply write down this statement.
And even gravity is along y direction.
But it's along negative y direction. That is 270. It shouldn't be minus 270. So I'll simply write down x component of forces R, and here I'll write down F1 dot Fx. This will be F2 dot Fx.
Use loop for this thing.
Okay, fine. I'll see to it how to tackle that problem.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe what you will have to do is you will have to put these values in loop. So we'll try to see how it can be done. Okay. So we will have to do it using string operations, and I'll post that. Okay. So that also I'll include it. So this F1, F2, F3, this needs to be generated in the loop. So this needs to be written, I mean, it should be written, it should be read as variable name. I'll show you how to do it. So, but it can be done in a different fashion. Okay, so let's run this. So I have not given enough space in between, so that's why it is shown in a pretty bad style, but it's okay. So the first one is almost 0, second one is 50, and third one is almost 0. Y component of forces are minus 100, 0, and 100. Okay, so I'm sorry for this one. Now it reads better. So the first one is almost 0, second one is 50, third one is almost 0. Y component of forces, first one is minus 100, second one is 0, and third one is 100. Okay, clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll stop here today. Okay, I will record one lecture in which I will tell you how exactly that constructor also required in that tutorial, or it's only the constructor. Can somebody just have a look at that tutorial and tell me?
And what will be our syllabus?
Actually, we are going to find out what is the least content that has been discussed. So let's say if the other batch I know that half of mechanical engineering, they are almost done with everything. But then there is the PNI group as well. So I don't know how much they have covered. So whoever has covered least number of topics, accordingly syllabus will be set.
Ma'am, actually, I just haven't heard a rumor that PNI students are going to have some extra classes.
Okay. So why do you say that it's a rumor?
Ma'am, I can authenticate the source.
Okay, fine. Okay, so we will decide based on that. So we'll have most probably a meeting sometimes towards this weekend or so, and accordingly we will be deciding that how much should be the syllabus, and is there any need for any extra class for us as well. I don't think we require any extra class. So do you need that there is any requirement of extra class for you?
No, ma'am.
You are already enough with this, right?
Some destructors are there.
Okay, so destructors are also there. So constructor, destructor, and this how to take care of this looping. So these are three things that I'll kind of include in one video and then try to upload it on Friday before our lecture time. So it will be available to you. You will have to just go through it. Okay, I won't be able to engage the entire class. So because I'm starting with another course as well. Okay, so that concludes our discussion over here. However, if you feel that we need any other slot, discussion slot, so we can arrange it sometime before exam. So that would be a good idea rather than having a class now. I would suggest that we will have it a week before our exam or something like that. So by that time you can also go through, if you have any particular queries, then I would suggest a CR to kind of compile all queries together, okay, and you can give me that compiled query, so I will also have an idea that what is it that if there is anything that needs to be discussed, and should we have any additional class towards just before a week of your examination. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, the question that Shrey was asking me, ma'am, means will it be solved using preprocessor directives?
I will have. I'll tell you that. That's what I'm saying. That you just have to use certain alternate methods. Preprocessor directives can certainly help you out in that. Okay. So there can be multiple ways in which you can do it. I'll show you one way. I'll do that and I'll show you. Okay. But you just have to kind of generate this F1, F2, F3 inside loop. Okay. But it will essentially be read as F1, F2, F3, but you just have to generate it by certain ways. Okay. So that you can do in many ways, and I'll be showing you one way of doing that.
Ma'am, once can you scroll up?
Shrey, I'm not able to hear you properly. Did you
Ma'am,
say
can you
anything?
scroll up? Scroll up, can you once?
Okay, fine, sure.
Ma'am, if we made this public line number 12 to line number 8, then will things change or it will remain same?
If you say public, then all these things, whatever that you are writing over here, those are accessible outside. That's the only change that it will have. Okay. In earlier case, we had seen that this force type, force magnitude, force angle, they were not accessible outside. Okay. So since they are not.
Ma'am, so in that case, this void set data will not be required, no?
That is not required. We are writing it just because this is not accessible outside. So
okay.
this entire stuff will go. Then it will become almost like a structure. But then there is still one very big difference with when you compare this with structure, and that is something called as inheritance, which we are not going to discuss as part of this course. So what you can do is you can, let's say, Shrey may decide to write down another class, okay, which will inherit this force class. So whatever there right now in force class, that will be inherited in that new class. And all these functions, this fx, fy, set data, display data, all these functions will be accessible in that new class. Okay, so that this is actually the major advantage of these classes, that you can inherit the other class. So this is one base class that I have written. Then you may feel that, oh no, I need to add up certain functionalities to it. So rather than changing this base class, what I do is I will inherit this, and in that new inherited class, which will be a derived class based on this, okay, in that I will add up new functionalities. This will remain, but along with that, something else will also be added. So it's like you inherit certain property of your grandfather, but then you also add up something to it, right? So that earlier things will also remain with you, and you will also be adding something to it. In the same fashion, you can inherit this force class, and you can add certain other functionalities to in that new derived class. This is possible with classes, which is not possible with structure. At least as much as I know, so that was not possible. So I don't know what are recent developments. So it can be possible that it's possible with structures as well. But in general, it's possible with classes, and then there are inheritance also happens in multiple ways. And that is something that you can think of as a self-study, if at all, if you wish so. Okay. So what is it that needs to be inherited? What is it that you don't want to inherit? How, whether public will remain public, whether private will remain private, whether private will at all be inherited. All these questions are there, but those we will not be talking about right now.
Excuse me,
Okay.
ma'am.
Yes, Paras, please.
While writing flowchart, when we write function and end function, do we have to write end in oval or in rectangular box?
If you are writing different flowcharts for different functions, then you can write it down in oval box.
Ma'am, if we are writing in the same function, same flowchart,
then obviously you don't have to write it in an oval block. Okay? Because oval box will end everything, right? So you don't have to write it. Okay. Okay, so we will have one session. Okay, so that session I will also be there. I will be clearing some of your doubts, and then there are small doubts which TAs will also be there to clear. So, for example, the doubt that Paras was asking. So these kind of doubts will also be kind of dealt with, and I want CR to collect whatever queries or doubts are there, and I want you to kind of combine that together and let me know that how much is needed from my side.
Okay.
Okay. So accordingly, I'll be able to take a call that how much time I need to spend with you in the last week. And one more piece of information is that I'll be letting you know anyways that you are going to have a Viva based on whatever projects that you have submitted. Date and slots of your Viva, everything will be communicated to you, and how it will be conducted. So everything I'll be letting you know very soon. Okay.
Ma'am, do the project, like two people had participated in the same project, so will they be having the Viva simultaneously or like at different times?
That call I am taking, because actually the number is pretty big, so I will decide. So if I have to take individual Viva, so 75 multiplied by, let's say, even if I say 10 minutes, if I ask, interact with each one of you, it's like 15 minutes I will have to spare. So which is a big chunk of time. Okay, I'll take a call, I'll decide, and I'll let you know. Okay. Any other query? Is there any other query?
no, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So I've stopped recording.